are back with comedian David Boyle, and I'm quitting alcohol. So it's 22 years now, 22 straight years that I have been waiting for the property prices in Australia to crash. And despite there being 8 consecutive rate rises in the last 6 months, property prices still have not fucking budged. I tell you what's gone up though, fucking rent today, $80 a week. I swear to God, even if property prices drop 96%, they still won't be down to the price they were when I first began death riding the property market 22 fucking years ago. Let's say 20 years. 20 years, let's make it around 20 years. Every single time that I feel like it's about to collapse, it goes the opposite direction. It goes exponentially higher. At the start of COVID, you're like, all right, thank God. The property prices are finally going to crash. Because before COVID fucking kicked off, I was working in the cranes and the whole fucking construction industry was going down. Everyone was talking about recession before COVID. People were worried about losing their jobs and shit. I'm like, finally, it's going to crash. And it's not like I was going to swoop in and buy. It's just so I can say, see, I told you they'd fucking crash. I haven't got any actual money to buy a house. I just want to go, see, who's right now after 22 fucking years? 22 years of hell. But then somehow, even though COVID fucking wiped out all industries for 2 years, property prices skyrocketed. I know now why, because the fucking governments of the world just printed trillions and trillions of dollars, and that money went straight into the asset classes. The biggest of those being property. But I didn't know that then. I just thought, what the fuck is going on? But even now, interest rates have been going up all year and property prices have not budged. Maybe they've gone down 3% on a $10 million house, which is a lot if you've got $10 million. It's like $300,000, but that's not the end of town I'm looking at. I'm looking at more the $250,000 to $300,000 houses. I'm looking at places where there's been mass murders and suicides and just some carnage through the house. A fixer-upper. Just a little fixer-upper that has had a mass shooting in the middle of nowhere, connected to nothing, no water, no access. Just something smack bang in the middle of Australia for a cool hard $300K. I'm sick of fucking waiting now. And I also can't buy a house now either. It's too risky because I know my karma. As soon as I buy a house, the fucking paper the next morning is going to say biggest property collapse in the history of property. Since the cavemen and the Neanderthals, there has not been a property crash this steep in the history of the planet. Not only that, rent prices have reached rock bottom levels. So in Sydney, since we got here, rent prices have gone fucking right up. When we arrived, it was still the back end of COVID, so cunts were trying to get rid of their places cheap. But now, fucking hell, you can't find a 2-bedroom place anywhere decent for less than $600 a week. And most of the time, you're looking more at $700, $850 a week. It's I might as well buy a fucking place. There has to be a fucking roof to it at some point, doesn't there? You can't just keep raising rent prices and property prices just can't keep going up forever. At some point, the madness needs to end. For the love of God. Fucking hell. Anyway, let's move on to fucking this week's Boyle Breaks history. So now that I'm an investment guru, I've been devouring a lot of stuff about macroeconomics, and the word petrodollar comes up a lot. Petrodollar. Have you heard it? They say, the petrodollar is under threat. And we all nod our heads. We're like, oh no, not the petrodollar. Fuck, not the petrodollar. And then quietly we're like, what the fuck is the petrodollar? Do you know? No, got no idea. So that's the topic for this week's Boyle Breaks History. What the fuck is the petrodollar? Well, it's quite simple actually. It's pretty much just the US dollar. It's the US dollar since it's been pegged to oil. What does pegged to oil means? All right, let me fucking get into it. So the US dollar up until 1971 was backed by gold. It was redeemable for gold by sovereign nations. So the nations of the world held all their gold in the US, and the US are like, use our dollars and we'll give you the gold whenever you want. 110, promise. And for some insane fucking reason, the countries of the world were like, yeah, sick. That sounds like a fucking good idea. And then the US got into a war with Vietnam, and the rest of the world were like, excuse me, how the fuck are you funding this psychotic war? And the US were like, don't worry about it. Trust us. We're not printing money. And the rest of the world were like, fuck, you're not printing money. And then France were like, hey, if you're not printing money, do you mind if we exchange some of these dollar notes for some gold? And tricky dicky Richard Nixon was like, fuck no, you're not getting anything. We're depegging the dollar from the gold. None of you are getting any of your gold back. Suck my balls and fuck off. What are you going to do about it? We're the USA. And then for some reason, all the countries of the world were like, oh, damn. They did nothing. Ugh. Fucking US. Anyway, once the dollar was depegged from gold, it becomes a fiat. It's backed by nothing except trust us. It's worth heaps. So the US dollar from 1971 to around 1974 collapsed. Basically, when you say, I'm not giving you the gold back for the money, that's defaulting. Anyway, during this time, tricky fucking Dicky was like, how the fuck are we going to get the dollar back to strength? And basically, he came up with the brilliant idea of the petrodollar. So what he did, he sent fucking Kissinger, that little slimy cunt. He sent Kissinger over to Saudi Arabia to negotiate a deal. Basically, the US said, you sell your oil in US dollars and then use the profits to buy US Treasury bonds. And what we'll do is we'll buy all your oil and we'll also give you military protection. And what they mean by military protection, they mean we won't come in and fucking bomb the fuck out of you. All right? We promise not to fucking fly jets through here and just level the joint. How does that deal sound to you, Saudi Arabia? And Saudi Arabia were like, yeah, that sounds all right. I don't mind that deal. So that's how the US dollar was initially pegged to oil. So the US buys Saudi Arabian oil with US dollars, and then Saudi Arabia reinvests all the profit from the sale of that oil in US Treasury bonds, which have an interest rate on them. So Saudi Arabia get Treasury bonds at like, let's say 4% a year. So it's like a savings account almost. The only problem is the US is inflating the fuck out of the currency. So basically, US is getting oil for free. So it wasn't only Saudi Arabia that agreed to this. It was all the oil producing fucking nations. And not only that, every nation, no matter what they were, so just say India is buying oil from Russia, they had to trade up until the start of the Russian-Ukraine war. When Putin said, fuck the US, everyone who wants to buy Russian oil has to buy it in rubles now. But up until the start of this year, if fucking India wanted to buy oil off Russia, they'd have to do it in US dollars. Every country, China and Russia, US dollars, everything. So that's what's kept the US dollar strong all these years. And basically the US has been fucking the entire world for like 5 decades. It's fucking wild that these countries even agreed to it. I suppose when you've got the most nukes in the world and the biggest navy, cunts listen. But it seems like the US petrodollar is coming to a fucking end. China's starting to get involved. Russia's selling theirs in rubles now. it could get real fucking dicey for the US soon. Anyway, that'll do for today. If you're enjoying the podcast, give it a share around, and I'll see you the fuck later.